Hey folks, it's Chris here. This is the presentation. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've decided not to use the Microsoft slides for this because I wanted to make this like really out there, and you'll see why, okay? But this is a presentation I did at CDS Saturday. Yeah, just bear with me because there's some crazy stuff going on in this slide deck. Anyway, this is literally going to be the most hardcore presentation. Well, I hope it is. So anyway, there's this really awesome slide that I found that gets used by Charles and James. And basically what they do is they talk about 500 million new apps being built in the next 5 years. And the demand for apps is growing 5 times faster. And then they talk about 86% of organizations struggle to find technical talent, which is really a highlight on what we call the great developer shortage. Anyway, lots of information. 65% of enterprise application development will be done in low-code, no-code. Oh, apps. Literally everywhere I go, it's apps. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, the perception is apps are not all of the platform. So as much trouble as I'm probably going to get into for this, I'm going to talk about solutions. And the reason is because when we talk about apps in the framework of Power Platform, an app is often deemed as like a canvas app, okay? And it's not always that, right? Because when you develop something or build something, it's not always just a canvas app or a model-driven app or a portal. There's tons of awesome stuff that you use in the platform, and all these little digital building bricks that you leverage. You then build these epic apps or solutions that organizations can use. And often an app is just a piece or one of those building bricks. So I'd like to let you know that I'm going to try my best to talk about solutions. The other thing that's really interesting on this slide is actually the point of the number of organizations with more than 100 terabytes of unstructured data has doubled since more than 2016. That's a lot of data. That's loads. And again, we keep on talking about, like, what have we told organizations to do with that data? I mean, we've told them to get the data and maybe train AI models and things, but we actually haven't told them how to action it or build stuff on it or act on it. So I'm hoping that this will give you some information. But data is at the heart of what we're doing, right? So when you take a look at organizational structures, and especially here at Microsoft, there's certain things you can identify as common within businesses. I'm not saying that these are all the things that are common. What I'm saying is that some of these things are common, and you find them all over the place, and no matter what vertical or industry you work in, you're probably going to pick up small idiosyncrasies and, certain terminologies or colloquialisms that'll be leveraged. Now, at Microsoft, what we did is we said, you know what? We're going to bundle those into what we call like little baskets. So we're going to call them Azure, Microsoft 365, and business applications. And they all live within our Microsoft cloud. So we've got this like big cloud with all these little buckets. And the Azure folk are really technical, and they understand all the nitty-gritty bits of the data and the integration and the security. And the M365 are collaboration and communication and security and modern desktops and all sorts of wonderful things. And the BizApps people are all about process and following the rules. And when there's a process, we will implement a BizApp. App. Again, I just can't shake it, right? Now, on the platform, when you take a look at Power Platform, what it is it's kind of the unicorn that weaves these three things together. So looking at the platform, now you would have watched previous videos before this point. Well, I hope you would have at least. Power BI, Yellow Excel, effectively comes from Office, okay? Power Apps is a consolidation of what we used to call Project Sienna in SharePoint. Business applications, the model-driven apps, effectively democratized from Dynamics 365. And same with the portal's functionality. Power Automate, yeah, that's Azure with Logic Apps underneath, and same with the RPA functionality, not really Logic Apps underneath, RPA is a whole other world, right? And then you've got the business process flows, which are effectively the business process flow logic democratized out of Dynamics as well. And then Power Virtual Agent, which I still think they should have called Power Bots. And Power Bots are like Power Virtual Agents, there we go, see, bad Chris. Effectively the Azure Bot Framework democratized directly within the Power Platform. But again, that layer underneath is the thing that matters the most, and that's your data connectors, your data, your common data service, AI builder. Data connectors are able to reach out and plug into other solutions and use their spidery arms to connect to other things. If the Power Platform was a house, the data connectors would be the electrics and the plumbing and things. They're the things that connect to everything else. The Common Data Service is our preferred cloud-based relational storage facility. We want to put data there. For me, it's one of the primary locations for information, and it's because it's got a lot under the hood, and we'll get to that a little later. But the CDS for me is really key. Okay, and then obviously AI will the snaps into all of that, and augmented with lovely artificial intelligence. Now, the whole reason for this discussion: data, the fundamental axis on which everything is built. Data underpins it all. Data is digital gold, my friends. When you took a look at Azure, Azure is the foundation in which the Power Platform, Modern Workplace, and Dynamics are built on. But it still requires data to make any difference. I mean, let's think about it, right? Why don't we take a look at a Power BI report? Mulling that over there. Okay, makes no sense, pointless. Let's supercharge it with data. Kapow! Done deal. There we go. Awesomeness. Turning data into information just makes so much more sense, right? This is useful. This is not. Okay? And everything we do needs to be supercharged with data. Again, I've taken a Canvas app in this scenario because Canvas app's one of the things that I work with on a daily basis. Everyone in the stack works with them. They're great for plugging those sort of simple business problems, right? So let's take a look. Bam. Canvas app without data. You know, kind of pointless, right? What does it do? Canvas app with data. Whoop. UFOs, my friends, just as an example. But this is really key because now this app means something to me. So let's take a bit of a dig. Many moons ago, in fact, not so long ago, we had the Great Data Wars. And what was that? Well, loads of people have been fighting since CRM 2011 about where data should live. You've got the SharePointers of the world going, data should be stored in lists. And then you have the business applications people of the world going, no. Data should be stored in XRM or CDS. And then the Excel people are ducking and diving, spears and things. But here's the thing, right? Every data storage facility has its place. But the Great Data Wars, everyone kind of lives in their own bubble. I mean, here's the thing. When you look at it like this, ultimately this was the landscape. You had Excel as a data storage facility. Yeah, no. SharePoint lists, awesome. They solve a lot of problems. Really fantastic for a lot of different types of use cases. CDS, great for loads of use cases, but can be overkill for some. And then SQL, everyone's favorite digital Lego brick. It just kind of like lives there. It underpins so much stuff. For me, SQL is probably one of those things that it's just going to be around forever. It's absolutely awesome. I don't know, maybe not community presentation, so it's not Microsoft Chris, it's Community Chris right now. So I had a chat with one of my friends, Paul Clumsy, and Paul's a bit of a legend, right? And one of the things I learned very quickly was that I can't go data source knocking. I can't go data source bashing. And I used to hate SharePoint. I don't anymore. I think it's awesome. It has its place. But here's the thing. So much of the data in the Power Platform lives in SharePoint. Consequently, so much data in the Power Platform lives in the CDS and in SQL. So we were having this constant debate of which one is best. And it riled everyone up. It got everyone crazy. So Paul and I started this crazy podcast. You know, Paul and I are both metalheads. We get pretty passionate about tech. We love our beer. And we thought, you know, we'd dig into some of these core pieces. So actually, Paul was one of the people that inspired and actually helped me understand the end result of this discussion, which I'm not going to tell you yet because I'll be giving that away. So yeah, big shout out to Paul. Anyway, here we go. We architect solutions using technology we understand, but often let budgets stand in the way. Oh man, there go the office people. They're getting ready. And I'm going, whoa. You know, and the Dynamics folk are like, but the CDS is the best. And the Azure nerds are just like, yeah, that's SQL. But here's the thing, folks. If you don't take the time to learn about all the other technology, how do you know what will work best in what scenario? Right? How do you know? You don't. And that's the key thing here. I appreciate the fact now that when I look at solutions, I will architect about what's best for the customer. And if it is best for the customer, right, the budget will not be a problem. Oh boy, gone and made all the commercial people upset. Sorry, but it's the truth. Value is in the eye of the beholder, and if you can prove value, I promise you people will not have a problem paying. Let me give you an example. Somebody refuses to pay for a premium connector. 2 days' time, you tell that person they'll go to jail if they don't pay for that premium connector. Oh, all of a sudden that premium connector is very important. I'm not saying that'll happen, but that's value. Now don't sell in fear, create value, explain the value, and that's really key. I can tell you right now that if I go to a customer with 10,000 users and I try and sell them the common data service for one app, and I'm using the term app on purpose in this scenario, not solution, they're not going to buy it. That's not value. That doesn't create value for them. Paying that £7.50 or $10 per user per month for a single app is not value. That doesn't fulfill the business value discussion. So what do? We have to look outside of that. We have to start thinking completely outside of that. Never be afraid to challenge, because it is you who lead the transformation of an organization. You cannot fold every time a customer says, I don't want to pay for that. If you can articulate the value, the customer will or should then see the need. Now that's the piece that's really difficult, because it's really hard to explain this to a customer. It's really difficult to say, you need to use SharePoint over CDS, over lists, over Oakdale, over this, over that. So it should never be that. And that's the point we'll get to shortly. So let's look at the different options you have from a data storage perspective. And actually there is one other one that I haven't put in here. SharePoint lists, awesome. Great for citizen devs. Really, really fantastic way to quickly get something working in the Power Platform. In fact, in my opinion, the most convenient way. Oakdale, now democratized relational data storage structure in teams that's got that security component to it. That's really got that robust scalability. SQL. Oh man, everyone loves SQL. Not everyone. Anyone that's done old relational data structures loves SQL, right? But SQL is really key, because actually SQL is one of the core fundamentals of relational data structures. What do you think underpins CDS and Oakdale? On-premises data. Oh, there are so many people using on-prem data. I get it though. I mean, sometimes people have that security blanket that they need. On-prem data is quite important, and we do need to be able to connect to it. And then finally, the common data service, super good for super users. Really, really fantastic data storage facility. But again, sometimes can be perceived as a Thor's hammer Mjolnir to crack a walnut, when maybe you just need a SharePoint list. The problem we have is we keep on throwing diagrams out like this every single time. We keep on saying to people, you have to choose. Pick SharePoint lists or CDS. Pick Oakdale or SharePoint. Pick SQL or Microsoft lists. I tell you what, that's the biggest problem that we have, is it's always an or. Nobody thinks of the and, right? This is where I'm going. So when we start looking at organizational structures and the type of solutions you're building, let's break it down real quick. Personal team productivity solutions. I need a solution that will help me do something now. It could be an app, it could be a flow, it could be a carrier pigeon. I will find a way to do it. If I need to manage a list of attendees, I'm probably going to chuck it in Excel. If I need to do something a bit more complicated, I can use Flow or Canvas apps. I can stick it in a SharePoint list. Fantastic. At least I've got some auditability and, some level of security. Simple business use cases. Well, unfortunately, Excel's gone out the window for me right now, because, there's got to be some more structure to this. But SharePoint and Oakdale just sound really good right now. And I mean, it's going to be split out with the rest of my team. I don't need to make it too portable. Yeah. What about complex processes and data structures? Oh, well, referential integrity between tables. SharePoint, you might be limited to the number. I think you've got 12 per list. I don't want to have to write too much logic in the form side in the Canvas app to manage this. What about looking at something like Oakdale, or maybe a common data service structure, or Oakdale is free with Office. CDS have got to pay some money. It's a premium connector. So does it require the actual value discussion? It probably does. Mission critical use cases. Now this is where it gets interesting, because a lot of the time the mission critical use cases are going to be reliant on security, auditability, governance, compliance. There's loads going to be in there that you need to really, really crack down on. And that's where tools like the Common Data Service come in and are massively great. Mission critical use cases, that is where businesses pay money for value, because they do not want to break something. Regulatory compliance, all that type of thing falls into that category. And then finally, this is the weird one. Organization-wide initiatives. Now, when I originally started discussing this slide, we came up with a couple of things, right? Typically, the first two pieces are going to be citizen developed self-service approach. Definitely. I'd reckon what you're probably going to find is that, I don't know, 80% of your solutions live there. 20% of your solutions are going to live in your line of business type approach. Now, here's the thing. Organization-wide initiatives, those can often grow up from business use cases. Now that's pretty interesting because I might have a business use case of like a Kudos app. I'm just going to use a random example. And all of a sudden my Kudos app, just people love it, right? And my app grows into a solution where I've got Kudos and I've got flows and I've got data and I've got reporting and everyone's like, oh man, this Kudos solution is awesome. And it just gets escalated to my organization-wide initiative. But now who supports that? I built the app, right? But how do I support it? I'm just Jeff in accounts, you know? Is that my job? Am I now supporting apps and solutions? Well, no, because it gets handed over to the center of excellence folk, the people that are managing these types of solution, timesheets, expenses. Those are never just simple use cases. They're organization-wide initiatives, but are built with the same type of tech as simple use cases. And this is where you've got to be very careful, right? Because the moment you cross that boundary of a small app that was built as a business use case moving over into an organization-wide initiative, you then need to manage the governance and compliance, not you, the IT team. And that's why I always say center of excellence is really key. Your typical complex processes and mission-critical use cases are never, ever, ever going to match the simple business cases. And that's why I say in no world can a simple business case cost the same as a mission-critical use case. So when you do that and you look at the underlying tech, you cannot complain about the premium connector license. It is there for a reason. Business connectivity versus personal productivity. That's the split between the two. Oakdale sits perfectly in the middle of those two, where you might have solutions moving over. Now think about it. If something is that critical and you have to have auditability on data, 7 layers of security, basic every CRUD operation managed and monitored, you've got to think about where you're going to put that. And do you trust which data source and why? But again, if you've got a solution that requires a couple of buckets for information, you don't want to crack that walnut with Mjolnir. You're going to squash it. So you have to think about the value. And that's very, very key in these discussions. This slide is my favorite slide in the world. When I talk to organizations all the time, I bring this slide up and I'm saying, where do you think your solution fits? Oh, it fits in the mission critical use case. I'm like, okay, well now have a look at this. In no world can a mission critical use case cost the same as a personal or team productivity solution. Oh, no, it's a simple business use case. Oh, is it? So tell me more about the data. Explain to me more about what you're doing with that data. I'll tell you another thing that we discovered very quickly as well, is that organizations will not or try not to pay for the premium connectors, and they will often hammer functionality into the free versions of Flow and Power Apps, Canvas apps in particular, and then complain about things like performance and scalability. It is a low-code platform. 200 lines of expression code in a Canvas app is not low code, my friends. What you've done is you've taken functionality that natively exists in the premium connector base and you've built it. You've created services revenue for yourself instead of getting your customer to pay for a license. So start thinking about that, and that's really, really important. It's a tough conversation to have, my friends, but I'm happy to be the one that has it. So when we start taking a look at this, you can't just pick one or the other. It's impossible. So Paul and I, after chatting, decided that it's probably going to be use case based, and actually, you're not always going to have one data storage facility. Whoa! What, we don't have to choose? No, you don't. You might have more than one, right? And that's really important. So we picked 4. We picked time and expense, health and safety, and we've been very vague about it, kudos and antisocial behavior. And I'm going to tell you why those use cases came up actually. But here's the thing. Let's go and take a look, right? So if you take a look at those use cases, let's use time and expense capture. Huge amounts of data, right? So that's probably an organization-wide initiative. You're not going to really query that data, so you're not looking for a lot of return, okay? But also, you're typically going to have a canvas-focused approach because model-driven app and time and expense is fine, but it needs to be fast. And you've got all that great AI functionality embedded in Canvas. So I thought, well, from a complexity perspective, actually, you're not going to have hugely complex functionality in there. I mean, it's relevant and it needs to be locked down and managed, but you could probably get away with actually building that out in something like SharePoint and SQL. SQL to store all the huge amounts of data, because that's effectively transactional data. And SharePoint to kind of manage the front-end interaction piece. So all your queries are hitting SQL, but SharePoint's the piece that's managing the actual app interactions. Great. Well, you're saying, yeah, we could do that anyway. Sure, you could. You could do that in CDS, but then you have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the organization going to be paying that amount of money? Oakdale, sure, great example, but Oakdale has its limitations. You're limited to, I think it's 1 million records or 2 gigs. What happens if you hit that cap? Then you're going to start transmogrifying data and moving it into SQL or somewhere else. That's the trade-off, my friends. You have to know the limitations of the platforms. The next one, kudos for the team. I love this one. We actually use this at Microsoft. So there's a kudos app that you can start leveraging. Now let's check it out, right? We chose SharePoint / and or Oakdale. Okay. So kudos is cool because there's no like interrelational stuff. You're not like saying that needs to connect to that, needs to connect to that, needs to connect to that. It's kind of like watching an EastEnders episode when everyone's sort of linked up weirdly. Now here's the thing. Oakdale, you could use, because the thing with kudos is not hugely relational. It might be, so you got your Oakdale functionality to make it relational if need be, but also it's going to be canvas focused again. You're not going to build a kudos app in a model driven application. That's just not going to happen. And again, the juice is not worth the squeeze. It's one app, right? So great opportunity for SharePoint and Oakdale. Now the next one is interesting. Mission critical case around health and safety. Now, I've actually deployed something like this in South Africa before. So you've got document management. It has to be highly relational. Whenever you create one of those, we call it SHEC, safety, health, environment, and quality. When you create those solutions, they are auditable and they can actually really change the way that an organization runs. So it is mission critical and it is important that you manage that data. Highly relational, highly transactional, massive amounts of reporting come off the back of it, huge process management. You could probably try and bake it into SharePoint, I guess, but you're going to spend more time doing that than if you just leverage the common data service and use SharePoint as the document repository. CDS has got all of that functionality built in. You can build that data model in a couple of days and you can have that model-driven app up and running with a side canvas app for reporting very quickly. Now that is definitely worth the squeeze, because I'll tell you what, if an organization fails on health and safety, auditors get involved. You pick your data set, my friends. This is where you define the value to the organization. What is it worth to you? And this is where you define the value. Is it worth going through the process of getting fined, getting audited massively, spending time on that? No, it's not worth it. Just pay for the license, use the right data storage facility. That is the key part. The last one, which is very important actually, this is one quite close to my heart, not because it's antisocial behavior or that it happens to be, but also because I've built a couple of solutions around it, and this one is very highly complex. You're talking about multiple branching business process flows. You're talking about huge amounts of data complexity, relational complexity, many-to-many type relationships with different people and different organizations, massive auditability on CRUD actions. You have to actually print out court reports on CRUD actions on this. Huge amounts of business process flows required, massive amounts of security. You need to obfuscate data down to the field level. And the example I'll use, which is not a nice one, but things like domestic abuse, you have to be able to lock down the actual offendee in that record so that no one can see it. That's common data service all the way. In fact, that for me is like, I wouldn't even think about anything else to using that. And the reason is because I know the core functionality in the CDS. So that baked in with a model-driven app and a Canvas app living on the side with Power BI and Power Automate. Fantastic solution. Absolutely brilliant. See what I did there? Absolutely brilliant. So very key to understand from a use case perspective that will work really well. But here's the thing. I could start leveraging SharePoint as the solution to manage all the unstructured data. I could start plugging into Teams. So the core component here is that it's not always one or the other one. There will be clearly defined use cases, but there will be some outliers that aren't. Okay. And the trick is to understand what the flexibility of the platforms are and what's best for your customer. And can you have that value discussion? And if you can't have the value discussion, I'm really hoping that this is kind of giving you some insight into how to talk to them. Yes, I know I'm a little bit brutal, but It is a really core point to make. So there's a quote by Ben Franklin, and I absolutely love this quote. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. Take a look at this. This is a terrible tattoo. Terrible tattoo. In fact, I've had 13 artists work on this. And you know what? Yeah, I wish I had just gotten it done properly. Okay? I spent so much money on this. This one, awesome tattoo. I love it. Loads of color, really fantastic. I've had one person work on this. That one person charged me a fortune the first time. I've never had to go for a touch-up. Perfect, right? And that is the thing. I've paid so much here because I went cheap first time around. This time, absolutely great quality. Quality is key. So when you start looking at the quality, you have to understand the licensing structure. And actually, this is really important because when you're building solutions, you do need to understand licensing. Now, a lot of you say, oh, the licensing guide, why? Actually, it's not very difficult. I mean, if you just read it, it actually makes a lot of sense. And Power Apps, I'm going to break it down to Power Apps, is effectively 3 types of licenses. Licenses you get with Office. You may not use premium connectors. You may use personal productivity connectors or standard connectors, but you get to use Oakdale as seeded with Office. So effectively, you cannot build model-driven apps, okay? Because CDS is a premium connector. The second license you have is what's baked in with Dynamics. So if you're a Dynamics user, epic. However, with your Sales Pro licensing, so if it's Team Member or Pro, you may only build embedded applications. You may not build extra Canvas apps or apps lying on the outside. Enterprise applications, you may build applications outlying from the actual first-party application. That's really important because as long as it's in the same tenants, it's fine. The third license type is broken down into 2 core pieces. That's your Power Apps license. You've got your per user license. Well, it's not all you can eat, but you get 2 apps. You're limited by the number of API calls, but those apps can make a big difference. And you can have a model-driven or a Canvas app. If you buy the buffet license, though, that's the all-you-can-eat. You can leverage pretty much as many apps as you want. Here's something else pretty cool. You do get access to premium connectors in there. So if you want to build an app and a flow that links up to Salesforce and puts stuff on Oracle and whatever, you've got free reign as long as you're paying that $40 or £30.20. Flows run in the context of all applications. As long as it's running within the context of the app, you are fine. If it is not, you need to either pay for a user license or an organization-wide license for Flow. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Flow, from a data integration perspective, in my opinion, is not the right tool. Okay? You can interface data between points and shift data, which is not integration. Flow is not an ETL tool. Extract, transform, load. You need to start looking at tools like Data Factory for that. If you do that with Flow, you will find yourself writing a lot of Flow logic. It is a low-code platform. So just remember that, and that's just my opinion, right? So a couple of other core things really quickly. When we went all the way back to the beginning of this, we started talking about data and licensing and all this kind of thing. And everyone, I kind of put the bait out a little bit because I thought, you know what, it's going to be versus, so CDS versus SharePoint versus SQL. Yep, and I did upset a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I can't use versus any longer. I'm happy to say that I use and. So when I talk to organizations, for me, I've got this amazing stack of stuff that I can use. And I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be great. Feed me information. Let's do a design thinking workshop. Let's understand more about your problems. And when they do that with me, I can be objective in my decision. Not, I hate SharePoint or I hate CDS. I can be objective and solve the problem with the technology I have in front of me. So with that, I'd like to say the hybrid approach, in my opinion, is the right approach here. We should all be working together. We all come from the same cloud, folks. We're all part of the Microsoft cloud. This is not an or discussion anymore. This is an and discussion. So thanks very much. That's me. And yeah, we'll be chatting again very soon. Cheers.